I
What's
will.
going on? What's going on? We are live. We are live. We are live. This is the post sermon recap of Bethel AME Church. I am Pastor Terrence L. Thomas. And every Monday we hop on here and do a sermon recap for those of you who couldn't make service. Though in this time of COVID, I'm still trying to figure out who can't make service because it's at home. But hey, listen, I know things happen and you got to work. So as you can see, my lovely co-host is not with me tonight. This is Father's Day is in June, and so this is the men. We got the board for the month of June. Uh, normally we get the big piece of chicken, and Papa was a Rolling Stone, like Chris Rock say, but this time we're gonna do something different. So I'm gonna let my co-hosts introduce themselves. I will tell you a little bit about them before I begin. So, in lieu of the lovely Reverend Lexus shout out, I have with me Brother Mike Richardson. And Mike Richardson and I, we both moderate under the wonderful platform of Unfit Christian by Danielle Thomas. We are the Gen Xers on the team. Um, and so, Mike, tell the people what you do, because Mike is a scholar and a gentleman.
so I'm Mike Richardson. I am one half of the podcast team for podcast Faith Uncut, where my co-host Amir and I break down theology and history and how everything converges and why we are living in the situations that we are in. And so that's what we do. I'm a theology nerd, and I'm here to talk. I'm here to talk with the fellas.
All right. And the man after Mike, my big brother in ministry, the reason why so many of y'all got me as a pastor that wouldn't let me go to seminary, one of the men that held my feet to the fire. He is my brother. I love him dearly. We started out not liking each other, but we pushed past that toxicity, and now he is in my inner circle, and I love this man. And so, the Reverend Derek Hammonds. Derek, tell him about yourself.
DK Hammond, serving, leading, and connecting people to their destiny every day. I am a husband of one wife, 4 children. I live in Dallas, Texas. Of course, I got podcasts. Of course, I do counseling and all that. But that's not why y'all are here. We are here to listen to Pastor Mike and Pastor Terrence while I eat watermelon. That's what we're here for.
And so I was telling DK, man, the post sermon recaps ain't holy. You can eat your food, you can tell your jokes. This is informal. So as you all are aware, for those of you who follow Bethel, who follow the ministry, and I do appreciate you, we have started a new sermon series entitled "Pieces of a Man." Pieces of a Man. Um, this sermon series came to me one day driving to work. I was listening to Gil Scott-Heron, his classic album from '72, Pieces of a Man, and it talked about the different aspects of manhood. And so I began to think, for Father's Day, what would it look like if we discussed different aspects of fatherhood, from parenting, legacy, our relationship with our loved ones, and even the transition from boys to men. What does it mean to do the emotional labor of masculinity in a healthy way and shake off the toxicity? And so God gave me some ideas. Y'all both know me. God speaks to me through soul music, R&B. And so this past Sunday, I preached on Joseph's journey using the song "You Will Know" by Black Men United, the song from Jason's lyric. Uh,
It's one of the greatest compilation songs ever.
One of the greatest compilation songs ever. If I maybe at the end I'll play it if I feel like fighting with Facebook, but I want to get through this. And so I talked about Joseph's journey, in particular, who he was. Joseph was the son of Jacob and Rachel. For those of you who know the Bible story and those you don't, that was the woman he loved. He wanted him some Rachel, but he wound up having to get Leah and a bunch of handmaids. But Rachel was bae. That was his queen. But they couldn't have kids, and so in between all of that, he had other children. And so finally, he did Joseph. Uh, he spoils Joseph. He let Joseph know, "Hey, you my dude. I ain't thinking about them other dudes, but you my dude. Uh, I love you." And his younger brother, Benjamin, he loved him too. The other 10, he could take a lead. Gave Joseph coats, gave Joseph privilege, and it created this dynamic. Joseph lived in that privilege. I interpret the scripture. Joseph lived in that privilege. The text tells us he harassed his brothers. He went around tricking on them. Every time they did something, he ran back to daddy. He even told his big brothers, "Hey man, y'all gonna bow before me." And it all comes to a head one day when he goes out into the field. They ready to murder him. Then they say, "No, we can't really murder him." So they sell him into slavery, and that act has an impact on how Joseph navigates that. And so when you compare that to the song, the song starts off, when I was a young boy, I had visions and plans. They were wild, they were free, and they were blessed with my name. Then I grew older and I saw what to see. My dream became full of pains, and my visions, they left me, something like that.
Yeah.
And you can imagine that's what happened to Joseph. And then he get locked up. Hey, locked up, don't let me out. Then he get out. Then he started working for Potiphar's wife. His Potiphar chick tried to holler at him and say no. Then he get a charge. He got to go back to jail, right? And he stays there. And so, but ultimately, it ends with him being the number 2 in Egypt, reconciling with his family, and becoming like this legendary name. And so, I talked about that these where Joseph made mistakes. Hey man, I'm gonna say it like DK would say, hey man, anybody ask you to tell about the dream God gave you and go out there harassing your brothers who already was aware that they wasn't what you were?
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nobody tell you to be snitching trying to get in good with dad. Brothers, I mean, you couldn't think of a better way to squash your beef with your brother than sell him into slavery. You literally tried to take his life.
Yeah.
Then I even talked about fatherhood a little bit because, I have friends, single moms often tell me, and they get on me as a dude with kids. We parent to the woman we love. We parent to the woman we care about. So if we care about the mama, if we had a good relationship, then that impacts how we parent. I am guilty of that, having been pulled to the carpet. It's often said my book ends 1 and 4 and get what they want. Middle ones got to fill out government forms 3 times. And so, but that speaks to where our relationships were at the time of conception. And so that's toxic. That's not healthy. The children ain't got nothing to do with that. And I talk about how this hierarchy even continues. Isaac had a hierarchy, Jacob over Esau, or let Rebecca kind of set that up. And Abraham definitely had that hierarchy. Isaac over Ishmael. And so that continued on in life. Mm-hmm. And so I was saying that these things impact us, but how do we push through? Somewhere Joseph learned to do the work. So somewhere Joseph learned how to operate in justice. Because when the average dude, man, I'm the king of a country, the number 2, I get back, you come before me, I got something for you. You sold me in slavery, I got something for you. But he didn't do that. He made sure that they wasn't the same dude. He didn't do that. He learned his lesson. He didn't smash Potiphar's wife. He's like, I ain't on that. This dude helped me out. He got me out of the, thing, gave me a job. I ain't gonna take advantage of that. And even if we want to go super deep and save, he had some relationship with God that God was able to speak to him through a dream. And so he had some relationship that wasn't grounded in his daddy or tradition, but he set up his own relationship. And so that's kind of what I talked about in the sermon. That as men, we need our own relationship with God. We need to learn how to operate in justice. We need to learn how to heal. We need to break these, what they would call generational curses. I call bad habits. So, I'm trying to my best. When I sit back and learn, I did learn favoritism from my father. So I'm trying to break that because that creates them beefs. Like that's why you like hell in the old days, 2 sons fighting over nothing. And so how do we do that? And so that's what I wanted to talk to us today about, how do we break this? Both of y'all know the Joseph story. That was just for the people who couldn't catch it.
Yeah.
But when we talk with sisters, all 3 of us share social media space. That's the one thing we hear. Black men, especially Black Christian men, don't do the emotional labor. We carry these bad traits around. We carry this toxicity around. And so, Mike, say more about that. What ways are we toxic? You tell the truth that really makes people pause, that you can understand the sister's frustration in their pause.
All right. So one of the main areas is just failing to recognize where we're immature and need growth. And that's the story of Joseph. Joseph starts off very naive. He's not really mindful of his flex. His brothers, they have an issue with him, but it's not because of Joseph. It's because of the treatment, as you pointed out, the preferential treatment from his father. But what Joseph does is, young 17-year-old, he comes and he tells his dream. Now, this is part of a plot device that we see in the scriptures is the brother problem. And so we see it in Cain and Abel, we see it in Jacob and Esau, and then we see it again here with Joseph and his brothers, where the conflict with the brothers drives the plot of the story. And so Joseph steps into that brother problem. So I learned from that it's important that cultivate and nurture those relationships with my brothers, whether they're my biological brothers or just the brothers that I hang around. It's important to get those relationships right out the gate, because as we see in the scriptures over and over again, a negative relationship will take you down the wrong path. And so in the beginning of this story, Joseph is naive and young, and he's telling a dream, and then he tells the brothers a dream. They get mad at him. So that's the first time we see in the text that Joseph recognizes that his brothers are upset. So what he does is has another dream and goes back and tells them again and the father. So he just he's just completely clueless about his position, who he is, and how he's seen. And so it's important for us to recognize, you know what I'm saying, where we are, what our station is, what's around us, and make sure that those relationships that we have close, that we're maintaining them in a healthy way.
Okay. My Bible scholar, DK, talk to me about your interpretation.
Well, I'm still stuck at Bible scholar, but whatever. A couple of things I think Mike has already alluded to that I'm going to kind of highlight as well. The negative impact of men who share their dream prematurely to the wrong people, who aren't prepared to help you carry or make their dream come into fruition. That's one. Number two, again, Mike has already alluded to this. I'm just kind of highlighting it. The favoritism that's been shown to Joseph versus the other children. That's another issue. But here's the last thing that ultimately Joseph has no control over, and that's the favor on his life. And as much as we would like to think that those negative things weigh down on us, yeah, but he still had favor to do what God needed for him to do. Here's another thing I want to highlight that I was just doing some reading. Joseph is averagely anointed.
Say more.
Sure. God does not reveal himself to Joseph as he had done for Isaac, Abraham, and Jacob.
Yeah, God's not even in this story. God doesn't appear except to initiate the plot through the dream. God is not mentioned anywhere else. He's not even mentioned in the dream. We just infer that it's from God, but God is not in the story at all.
Absolutely. In sharing his dream, he doesn't gain anything, and he has character issues.
Okay, say more about the character issues.
Yeah. So, of course, as a man, one of the things that I think we learned at a young age is don't snitch and don't tell everybody your business. Right? Joseph didn't get that lesson while he was shepherding as a young 17-year-old. And so he was just excited, exuberant. And then, of course, on down the road, he started making some critical decisions that kind of put him in a position. Kind of left him in some different places that he wouldn't be in had he not made certain decisions along the way. And so that impacted his character. He didn't see God at all like the others had seen God, but yet he was still anointed, and yet his dream still came to pass. And so to encourage men on the front end, you can have a lot of X's against your name, but ultimately what matters is the path that God has already trailblazed for you. And so that's what I would lift up about that.
No, I thank you for that, because that's critical. You can have X's against your name.
Can I address that?
Yes, go ahead.
That's a critical point. So in Joseph's story, it's a story of most of us. Like you fail more times than you succeed. Right. And so in Joseph's story, what he could perceive as failure or like a negative, hold on, I gotta get my light right. This ain't gonna work. Hold on.
Take your time, brother.
Hey, look, get your light right, brother.
I'm gonna fix it. All right, here we go. So what happens with Joseph is he ends up in a cistern from his brothers, right?
Right.
Away from his family, into the cistern. Terrible. He gets out of the cistern and is sold into slavery.
Yeah.
It's bad again. he gets out of the slavery. I mean, out of slavery into he's in Potiphar's house, right?
Yeah.
He seemed like it's a come up, but then he's accused of rape. He gets thrown into the dungeon of the palace. All right, but every step along Joseph's path that looks like a failure is putting him closer to where he ultimately needs to be.
Yeah.
Because he needs to be in the palace. He needs to be next to the person in charge, the number one, so that he can do what God has for him to do. So being able to assess those failures as something as a movement point forward. I mean, it's bad, but that doesn't mean you're not making progress. And so for men, well, at least for me, you know what I'm saying, it's important for me to know, these failures come. You know, I need the one success, but I'm gonna keep failing. But that doesn't mean God is not with me. That doesn't mean that I'm doing a terrible thing, because in a lot of cases Joseph was doing the right thing and he was just failing forward. So it's important to recognize when that's going on, learn the lessons, and keep moving so you can end up where you're supposed to be.
Would you say that
let me get some of that too. So Mike, two things you mentioned about the pit and Potiphar's wife that I think we cannot gloss over. We gotta put some thought to that. Why then was he in the pit? I think I'm in 37, verse 19. They said to one another, "Here comes the dreamer. Come on now, let's kill him and throw him in one of the pits." Just because of what they heard, just because of the preconceived notion that had been shared down the gossip lines, they took that as a threat and then wanted to basically assassinate him. That's the pit.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes those pits seem very cutthroat, crab in a barrel mentality. And yet God is taking you through this process, this siphoning, if you will, this wheat from the tariff, if you will, to ensure that by the time you make it to Potiphar's house, you know how to deal with people as a man that talk crazy about you. So now we have Potiphar's house, where he is then accused of rape. Now let's stay there too, because most men, some men, I'm gonna say most, some men have been in that very position where they have been accused, and some men have actually went through with that. But in this case, according to the text, he darted the door. Where all she could grab a hold to was his garment, because he was moving that fast. And so what it also connects with men is that men need to check their boundaries, because if we don't check our boundaries, what we will find out is we'll go down unnecessary roads until the boundaries get built up correctly, and then we'll get put on the right path.
So it's a boundary issue. So y'all both touched on something that I think is critical. One, that failure is part of the process. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of brothers struggle is for all of our bravado and swag, do we really know how to take the life ills that come at us, not internalize it, not become despondent, not develop these behaviors based off of that ill? So that's one. I think that's a great lesson. Hey man, you're gonna catch an ill. How do you respond to that ill? Sometimes it's injustice. I do struggle, you know, with the character, biblical character Joseph. I'm middle of the road. I empathize with him in that he didn't ask for how he was born into, but I do think at 17 he had some awareness that daddy loves me a little more, by evidence by the coat, right? Evidence by some things. And so were you a smart mouth 17-year-old teenager out there with your grown brothers and it went left? So was you in your lane? There's also a lane question with that. But then I also hear about boundaries. And so I think that's another thing that we as men, good and bad boundaries, we sometimes don't have the appropriate boundaries. I know is that often comes up in interpersonal relationships. When I was going through my CPE training, one of the things, man, you ain't got no boundaries. You let anybody say come to you. You don't have a no button. It showed up in my relationship a couple of times, like, man, I need you to shut this down because this person has too much access to you. This thing has too much access to you. So, but I also have come to realize that a lot of times we don't put up boundaries because we don't want to be seen as weak, or we don't want we got this thing where we struggle with being weak. So can either one of you all speak to weakness in black men, right? Because I also think that speaks to his brothers. Like, man, this little dude ain't gonna keep coming out here talking about we gonna bow to him. Ain't gonna keep making our day hard before we snap. So can you all speak to how black men handle the notion of weakness and the perception of weakness?
I'm gonna let you go first, Pastor.
Weakness. Black men are always going to test other men's weakness. It's innate in us. It is something programmed in us where we can tell very quickly through our own toxicity how weak you may be. And to some degree, we will try to expose that early for advantage sake. As men, we'll try so we can get that one up on you. We try to expose that early, say, "Oh, you're not better than me." So let's relate that to the story. Okay. What did Reuben say about Joseph? Man, look, check this out. Check this out. This is what we gonna do about him. We gonna sell this cat for profit. Hey, his dreams to them was sought as weakness and problematic. And so, brothers, his own family was like, no, we can't have this dude around here just profit line, nothing is coming to pass. We can't have all this extra that he doing. So check this out. What we gonna do is, and the black church they call this, we're gonna reposition him. We're gonna reposition him in another place so that we don't have to worry about his weakness. When in fact, that wasn't a weakness, that was uncultivated potential that they saw as weakness. And so as men, what I've learned is I'm not trying to expose your weakness, but what I am trying to do is make your weakness your strength when you get around me. And so, like Terrence said before, we bump heads. And it's a reason why we bump heads. Because I see something in you that warrants that. Because I don't do that for everybody. I just don't. But once we bump heads and we sit down and have a conversation, now your life is going to be rerouted. Because you see what I was doing was not out of hate or not out of being a problem like we seen as brothers, Brother Reuben. It was out of love. It was out of guidance. It was out of setting you on the right path and trajectory. So I think men have to do a better job with this weakness thing. Weakness is not tears. Weakness is not weeping. Weakness is not being depressed, having mental illness. That is not weakness. That's just not. What weakness is uncovered potential that somebody needs to come and help cultivate.
Okay.
And that's what weakness is.
Okay. Mike?
All right. So, yeah, I'm going to approach this one from the work that is required to assess what we believe are strengths. So the weaknesses come out of perception of a lack of strength. So what do we consider strengths for men? A lot of times those are the things that lead us down that toxic path. So, physical strength, sexual prowess, you know what I'm saying? Like the ability to have a lot of people attracted to you, the ability to be stronger than someone else, in terms of like strength, oppression, imposing your will on someone else. And so if these are the things that we consider strengths, then we're going to always be tempted to prove those things out. And you'll never be the strongest person. You'll never have enough partners. You'll never have. And so that puts you in a cycle where you're constantly operating at a deficit. So you interrogate that and say, all right, so what things should I consider strengths? Should I consider my character a strength? Should I consider, my dedication or my loyalty as strength? These are the things that they're not specific to men, but I think for men, because we were trained in these other things to view those as strengths, that it's important for us to pull back off of that, because if we start to see these other areas as strengths, then we don't have the problem that DK is talking about. We don't have a problem with crime and mental health and all these other things, because that doesn't even factor into why I believe myself to be strong.
Right.
Okay. No, I agree with that. I do think it comes a point where it's interesting when we talk about our lives, and I'm sure you all have experienced this, that what we thought was our strength, in fact, was our greatest hindrance. Oftentimes, the thing that got you in the most trouble, I was told for years, your best thinking gets you in the worst trouble. Your mind is beautiful and it also is problematic. But then after years, I thought my heart and compassion were weakness, and then was told, and through prayer and seeking God, come to realize that that's actually probably one of my more stronger traits, that I have a great deal of compassion. And so I do think that in this season that, the first thing is first, the other half of the community is demanding something different. These sisters ain't playing. These sisters ain't with it no more. So we gotta kind of take a step back and hear what's being said, and have honest conversations among men, which is why I'm glad you two were able to do this. How do I, as a man, my tears don't make me weak. Falling into depression is not weakness. That's a horrible construct. But we were given those things, and I think that the things that once were critical for our survival are now was killing us. There was a time we could not afford, in the face of overt type of oppression. Mr. Charlie couldn't see you cry. You couldn't break down at the factory unless you lose your job. You had to keep your emotions and stuff together for your family and for whatever you were engaging in full survival mode. But I'm not sure that that's healthy anymore.
But that's important that we call that out, though, because those things, to not dishonor the men that went before us, that trained us, for certain reasons, they had to survive. My father is in the civil rights movement. Like, he's grown up in the civil rights movement and Brown versus Board of Education and integrated schools and stuff like that. So, and then his father is even in a worse time before that. So those survival mechanisms are trained not because they believe they're the right thing. They're trained because they believe those are the things that will keep us alive so that we can learn better things.
So what it seems like, though, if we have an honest moment, we're the point in human society where we're reassessing the tool belt. So what in the tool belt do we keep, right? Because as you just said, Mike, everything the old school taught us wasn't wrong, and I think we should say that there are certain things that everything old school taught us wasn't wrong, wasn't all right, but it wasn't all wrong. So what in the tool belt do we keep? As Christian men, and then we got a question. Damn it, I knew she was going to ask a question.
Her question is,
somebody's supposed to be in class still finding ways to ask questions.
Yeah,
I tell you about your producer, boy.
How do women support and correct man's actions when they see toxicity? That was important.
And you are trash on me for reading.
Listen, we're in a new life where we have to be inclusive and not mute the voices of others.
So the question on the floor, I'm gonna double back to the tool belt, is how do women support and or correct a man's action when they see toxicity?
I'm gonna go first since I read the question.
All right.
There is, don't approach that man in his toxicity with malice and hate in your voice. Not gonna help you. So your approach to addressing a character flaw like toxicity is going to be how well you're able to convey the very issue that concerns you. So if you fly off that handle and you get emotional and you get extra, then you've just built up this wall that you can't communicate through. But if you address it with facts, if you address it in a loving way, that brother would be apprehensive, but at least willing to hear you out because your approach wasn't off. It's just like saying, as a man, one of the things my wife hates is that I drive her car and don't put gas back in it. And so she's going to lose her marbles every time I do this. And I do it more times than I care to admit. But she hates pumping gas. If I do this and I approach her and say, hey, you should pump your own gas. Well, that comes off like I don't care, right? But if she says to me, you know what, I would appreciate it if you drive the car, just put more gas in it so I can continue to roll or whatever, because really I want to spend your money versus my own. Cool, I can do that. So being able to communicate that, knowing the level that person is on, because you may come with this toxic masculinity thing and he's never heard of the term. So what type of environment has been created for him to receive such a message? Okay, you just can't throw the term out there and it's not received well because we haven't defined what it looks like. And then what examples have you given him to say, this is how you do things that aren't toxic, but this is what happens when you do things that are toxic. And what do we have in between? Learning lessons to get us from place to place.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, it's all right. So if you're dealing with somebody that has done a lot of this work and thought through some things, you got more options. If you're dealing with somebody that's just, coming into contact with some of these concepts, one of the things DK is talking about is more of, for lack of a better word, it's almost like a habit, training instinct, whatever, just a bad habit. Like if you flash, then we competing now. Like it's, you know what I'm saying? Like we, that's where we at. All right, let's go. So that energy does get returned for someone who's not thinking through what the issue is. So it's important to be conscious of that. Like what type of person are you dealing with? You dealing with somebody that can take, you could take that flash, or they're going to return the same thing, the same energy back to you. The thing that's most effective with me is just communicating what the problem is in a way that not necessarily like the way you have to communicate it. I just need to know that I messed something up and it hurts you. And the reason why is because I want to be with you. Like that's the driving force behind me wanting to engage the conversation, fix what I messed up or whatever. Like that's always there. And my wife trusts that. So all she got to do is let me know, hey, that wasn't it. You know what I'm saying? Like, or she could, be upset or whatever. And because I want to repair a relationship with her, I'm going to do it. So she has a little bit more options in how she does that. And that's just based on, you got to know who you're dealing with.
Okay. What would you say though? Because it's funny because I hear a lot of our peers saying, yeah, that sounds a lot like hand-holding. I should be able to tell that blankety blank what it is. You're being toxic. I should be able to read him for filth. If I tell him I don't like this whatever the behavior is, and I shouldn't have to hold his hand and he should just receive it. Is there some truth to that?
Is that how you want him to go at you every time you mess up? Because that kind of assumes that everything you do is clean. You're not clean either. So when it's your turn, how do you want that to come to you? Do you want him to just immediately flash at you, or would you prefer him to communicate why something bothered him? Why that? I mean, it's not like it's tone policing. It's just effective communication. Like you really want to say what it is that bothers me. You can say it and be upset and loud or whatever, as long as you're saying what it is, so that I know how to respond. I know how to adjust.
Mike, I think you said something very important that we have associated toxic masculinity with, and that's tone policing. We think that because I said it in a certain manner, and it had a little oomph on it, that gives you the ability to police what I said, or how I said it, or how it was interpreted. But that has to be, really thought through with a fine lens, because I want to be able to receive what you're saying, but at the same time, I want to be able to receive it in the position that you're in.
Yeah.
Okay. You're not my mom's, so there's a certain way my mom can talk to me that's going to go over any way she wanted to go over, because she's held that position down. She owns that. That's her spot. But if you're my wife, there's a certain way I'm expected for you to communicate with me, because you're expecting the same thing from me to you, like you just mentioned. So I think the tone of it, we kind of associate that with, okay, that's being toxic, and that's farther from the truth. I think it's perfectly okay to communicate that you have an issue. Okay, it's perfectly okay to communicate it with XYZ words. Cool, but am I using that communication to construct or deconstruct. And if you're deconstructing, then you just missed the part.
Yeah. So for me, like, I think about it in musical terms. I'm a musician, and it's not tone policing for me. It's more dynamics. So just because I can play an instrument doesn't mean I play it as loud as I can all the time or as soft as I can all the time. Like, I have to be aware of what's around me, who I'm playing with, so that we can achieve a blend. Okay. So sometimes I need to be louder, sometimes I need to be softer. And so if I've offended you and it is really bad, I expect that to be loud. I expect that to be a big reaction. But if everything is the big reaction, then we can't blend. Or contrast that with the fact that if I've offended you and I never really can gauge that was a huge offense, because everything is just like, then I can't move. We still don't blend in that relationship. So I don't think of it in terms of tone as much as I do dynamics, because there's always a right time and a wrong time to be a certain way.
Okay, and I appreciate that, because that's one of the. I'm laughing because we talk about toxic masculinity, but my mother used to say that all the time. If you have the same reaction consistently, then it's time to check some things, good or bad. So if nothing ever bothers you, you got to look at that. If everything bothers you, you got to look at that, because there's no balance there. Right. And so I know one of my traits is I'm at the place in life where it takes an act of Congress for something to bother me. Right. But then that creates problems because it's urgent to everybody around me, and I'm coming off like, I guess, man, somebody wants some Doritos, and that's not what I'm trying to convey. Well, sometimes it is, depending on what it is. Yeah. But that doesn't lend itself for open and honest dialogue, because if I'm honest, if you treated my emotions like that, I wouldn't talk to you either. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, I remember being younger and everything was a fire, and I remember, man, relax, man. You figure it out. Like, why is you going off on that? Like, it was just McDonald's. Like, some of my younger brother struggles with. I love them, but everything's a pop off. And so it's like, how do that blend? I'm glad you gave it to me, because I conceptualized it when you talked about it in music. Yeah. If you're playing the horn loud all the time, that's not necessarily music. It's appropriate in the right context, but if you not playing it soft, that's not music either. Right. So I appreciate that.
And to that point, to Mike's point, that's about reading the room. Mm-hmm. That's about understanding what's in pocket and what isn't. That's about understanding who you're playing with and who you're not playing with. Mm-hmm. That's about understanding the holes that you see, and instead of trying to just smash through holes, you kind of gaze over them so it'll fill up really, really nice, and people won't remember that there was a hole. It's a lot of stuff. What he just said in terms of dynamics and music, there's a lot of stuff to that, and it takes proper finessing to know how to do that. Mm-hmm. And everybody has not grown to that point. And so to the point, T, about hand holding, I don't think you have to do a lot of hand holding when you effectively communicate in a dynamic situation, as we've already mentioned.
And you learn dynamics with practice. Like, no one comes to the band room and automatically knows how to remember the next person. And you don't have to be a musician to know this. If you was just listening to the radio, they don't do a lot of groups anymore, but you didn't want the background singers as loud as the lead all the time. You don't want that triangle or that bass to be as loud as the person singing. Like, you wouldn't want to listen to that. That's not a thing. And it takes time learning that blend. So I would say just be kind to yourself. Understand there's going to be mistakes made. People going to come the wrong way. But if you really want to be there, then y'all will keep practicing and work towards that blend.
All right.
Some more to add to that. It's some men that ain't going to have all the answers. Yeah. That is not, they're not built that way. And they're learning as you learn. And if you're not willing to, I'm not going to say build them. I'm not going to say that. But if you're not willing to impart knowledge to help them get to the place where they understand dynamic, then maybe that's not the person for you to turn that relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're going to make this actually the last question. So we're going to go back to the tool belt.
Okay.
Well, we talked about that. What are some of the things that, what is healthy? Let me do it this way. What does healthy masculinity look like to you in 2020? And then the last 10 minutes or so, and how what does it look like to you, and then how can we implement that in the church? As I was talking about before I went live, I was talking about my interaction with a certain group here in Champaign and how I perceive the leadership to be very toxic. Very, you can tell they just used to talking to anybody any kind of way. Still got that old go get my coffee woman, I'm a pastor motif. And so I want us to spend a little time talking about that in the body of Christ. So what does healthy masculinity look like, and how can we bring it to the church?
Pastor Mike.
All right, so I'm the only one that's not a pastor. All right, so for me, so things I learned growing up that I keep in my toolkit. Like I saw my dad get up every day at 4 a.m., go work out, go to work. He'd work all day, come home, pick us up. But the thing that was cool about my dad is when he got us up for school and we were getting ready, it would be something like, I'll be like, Dad, we out of toothpaste. And he'd say, okay. Every day that happened, toothpaste was there when I got back. You know what I'm saying? When I got home from school. My dad would make sure we had breakfast. When my mom was down, he took care of everything for her. He made sure that we was there. And this was a long period. This was like 14 years where he was doing a lot. He was always there, always present. And that's in the family context. Outside of that, he made sure that on his job, he worked hard so that he always had a place to go. So anytime he committed to something, he did it, and he did it well. So I've learned that from my dad. I learned to be humble, not necessarily not speaking up for yourself when it's time to, but understanding that you're not always the smartest person in the room, and you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. So surround yourself with people that you can learn from, and actually shut up and listen and learn from them. That humility goes a long way, especially in the church. Getting in leadership positions and not really understanding what's going on, even if you're not in leadership, there's a lot to be learned. And if you don't learn it, then you'll always be the same person you are, and you're not good enough. Like whoever you are today is not good enough. So we all got to get on the ball and learn a lot more, and that requires the humility. Just making sure your commitments are right, making sure your word is right. And the thing that I didn't learn that I've been learning recently is the communication piece. Like I grew up, I never saw my dad, maybe him and my mom argued maybe 2 or 3 times my whole time going there. But they were huge arguments because he would wait until, the thing built up, and then it'd be this big blow up. It's just not a healthy way to be. And he knows that. And I learned from him just by watching him, if something bothering me, I need to be able to communicate that. So my mom was the one who taught me, if it's something bothering you, what is it? Tell me what it is. You need to be able to articulate that. And so my dad, he didn't really like that. He grew up in the old school. He was like, if something bothering you, just deal with it. But she was like, nope. Just tell me what it is. I might not agree with you. You might not get your way, but I want you to be able to communicate what the problem is. So that served me well in all of my relationships, in churches and in professional life and everything. The ability to be able to articulate to connect my feelings with my words is like, that's the number one thing that you got to have in this toolkit, or you're going to fail a whole lot.
Okay.
Hey, man, that's a hell of a toolkit. I would say ditto to that. I would add the spiritual component to the toolkit. I think men have a awareness of God, but don't have a connection to God.
Oh, okay. Okay.
They're aware that He exists, and they're aware that there's a higher power, but the relational connection that they need to have to God, oftentimes it's a disconnect, and you can tell. And so I didn't learn about God or Jesus through my dad. My dad was alcoholic. So I was learning how to play street games and run numbers and, go to the store and pick up corner packages. That's what I was raised how to do from a man's perspective. But my mom taught me that spiritual side has value, and if cultivated properly and you're connected to God effectively, you can do and overcome a lot of things as a man that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do. That's one thing. The next would be, and I'm trying to get out. I wrote some stuff down, but Mike he's done a great job of highlighting them. Learning how to be, yeah, he did a great job, man. Learning how to be inclusive.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah,
you're gonna have some homies straight up that are gay. Guess what? Deal with it.
That's
like they still homies. You feel me?
Y'all still gonna have a good time.
Yeah, we're still gonna have a good time. You're gonna have sisters that like sisters, and you need to be able to deal with that to have a space that is inclusive of everyone, not excluding anyone out of the substratum of where you live, but bringing in a community that actually looks and resembles like heaven. That's like super important for men to get now, because we have been taught that when you have a weakness, when we perceive that your masculinity is off base, when we think that you talk too softly, then that's instant disregard. When in fact, that is not instant disregard. And we have to create that community where these people, our family members, our community mates, can come in and feel the love just like anybody else. And as a man, we have to be able to create that environment. They're going to be kids. Your kids may come to you and say, I'm attracted to this. What are you going to say? There has to be an environment that allows for those talks and conversations to be in a place where their love can exude through it as well. I think active listening, right? Parker J. Palmer talks about the importance of letting your life speak, because in it, your life will determine the direction and values of which you need to obtain. So in listening, the offset to that is shutting your mouth. As a man, shut up sometime. You don't have all the answers. Say you don't know. That's powerful. Hey, I don't know that, but I'm gonna go look it up and I'm gonna tell you what that answer is. I'm gonna Google that joint. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get that back to you. Another thing that's not on my paper, but I feel like it needs to be said, that is learning how to share power. As men, it's something you ain't taught. Again, we're readdressing the tool belt. We have not been taught how to effectively share power with our loved ones, especially the ones that we're married to. We automatically think and deem that the power is solely in our hands as a man. Now, you are responsible to some degree of things that should go on in your house. But what happens when you lose your job? The power shifts, right?
Right. I've experienced that firsthand with my dad. Yeah.
So now there's a new dynamic that has been established, and now you have to learn how to exist within that dynamic. And to some men, they get depressed because you don't have. I've been there. You don't have the same. I don't have the same movement because I'm here and you here. Or I'm not making the same amount of money as you. Fool, that don't matter, because if we bring all the money in together, we balling up together. Mm-hmm. And so creating those types of shared power spaces, inclusive spaces, a space that allows you to listen to your life. So let me go back to that. As a man, take time to breathe and be. Mm-hmm. Too much going on, too much movement, too much talking. Get somewhere, go get you some cognac and a cigar or whatever your thing is.
Yep.
Sit yourself down right there and be.
And be.
And you would be surprised how God will speak. Clarity will come. You know, things that you need to address can be addressed now. You have the proper words simply because you shut your mouth and you just sat there. So those are the things I would add to the list that Mike is already.
You know, it's funny because y'all touched on a lot. My dad was a protector, fiercely protective. He's a cop. So you wasn't coming for his family. Like, you weren't going to disrespect his children. You weren't going to disrespect his woman, his daughter, all of that. We had to settle up. So I'm fiercely protective of my family. Like even DK, you say your dad was a hustler, but he still, the get up and get. Like my old man would frown if he saw what time I got up sometimes, or his grandsons. You know, he was hey, listen, you got to work, and he was big on meaningful jobs. You know, he would struggle with. He would be understanding, but he would struggle with a lot of these cats working at Walmart and 40. Like, man, do what you got to do, because especially if you got a family. Like, these companies ain't gonna ever pay you $30 an hour for this. So that's a foolishness. You need to go back to school. We need to do what we had to do. So when I got expelled from Fisk, when I was struggling, he sat me down and was like, man, you 12 credit hours from a bachelor's. That's you, son. And you're not doing what you're supposed to do, take care of my grandsons. And so that lit a fire under me. Like, T-Mobile wasn't gonna never pay me a living wage. Like, none of that was gonna happen. And so I had to go back to school. And the minute I did, opportunities opened up. But my dad also didn't know how to share power. So when he got hit with cancer and my mom had to take over, I think that contributed to her early death, because, man, she didn't know what was going on with them finances and found out about stuff he had moved and did. And so he never shared power, because this thing was always my house, my say. And so that was something that I'm adamant on as I prepare for marriage. Like, how do we share power, man? Because I don't know everything. You just in simplest terms, I'm the better cook. But them household projects, them bookcases and shelves, if I do them, they look like this. You know, she do them, they look like right. You'd be like, did he have a seizure when he was putting this stuff up? So I've learned that, you know, hey, man, I don't know everything. My dad was about lessons, but he also got to a point where I ain't finna teach you nothing else, man. You'll figure it out. And so I think that could be both a positive and a negative. And I struggle with learning how to use that, because he got to a point he stopped talking. We done already had these conversations. I've already laid out expectations of you. Now comes the wrath, and so, or consequence. And so I do admit, I think sometimes that works both ways, but ultimately, man, when and where to speak up is also a big thing. You talk about humility, Mike. You know, as he got older, he said, I cost myself a lot of spots on the force just by talking too soon, giving folks my ideas, making moves that I shouldn't have made. And so as he got older, he was big on, like you said, sit still. And he always explained it in the lesson of dominoes or poker. In both of those games, if you don't have a move, you don't make a move. And so you learn to sit still, knock the table, pass, even throw in a whole hand, so you can come back with a better hand. And so I've learned the art of you know what, I'm gonna knock on this table, I pass, or you know what, this hand ain't working, let me throw in another hand, we'll get it back next pot. Because if you keep trying to play that bad hand, if you keep trying to make moves you don't have, you lose everything. And so if you ever play with you can tell an experienced poker player, because they bet on inexperienced poker player, they bet on every hand. You just threw your hand in after that bet, brother. You didn't have nothing. And so I think that's kind of, and definitely a relationship with God. My mother developed. Now he developed one before he died, but when he did develop one, it was for real. And so he went to his grave faithful. Like, I'm not flickering. And so I think that there's a lot in our tool belt that we have, that it's not all bad. And I think that's kind of where I'm trying to go, that you all help me with this sermon series. Some stuff, man, and the immaturity, doing the emotional labor, you know, and that's a big thing. We all kind of say it in our different way. Your mamas can't do it, your sisters can't do it, your wives can't do it. We got to do the labor.
Yeah. So can I touch that point real quick before we leave?
Yeah, go ahead.
Back to the scripture?
We got 6 minutes.
All right. So I ain't gonna take that long at all. So remember, at the end of this story, Joseph takes care of his brothers. So he's grown over the course of the story, and the story of Joseph is a story about how the Israelites got to Egypt to be enslaved. So on one hand, like rabbinic scholars look at that and say Joseph was the person who led them into slavery, but Joseph was the person who saved them from the famine had they stayed where they were. And so Joseph was able to move through all of that, and God took care of it on the back end through the Exodus, but Joseph was able to save his family. And so as men, if we're talking about toxic masculinity, it's important for us to take care of each other and lift each other up. So you should always have at least one mentor and be at least mentoring someone else. You should have at least one on each side. have more than one, but we have so much work to do that we need to be taking care of each other, making sure we're bringing someone up as someone is bringing us up, so that we can be better and do this work that we're overdue for doing. So I just wanted to just tie that back to the scripture and how Joseph actually did come back and save his brothers who did not take care of him.
Yeah, I would like to also add on that back end too. Don't think because you save somebody that accountability is not coming, because when in fact it is. And so a lot of men think because, you know, I'm sweet, I'm suave, I got the lingo, you know, I'm pretty Ricky, what they call me, that I'm going to be void of accountability. No, it's coming in a matter of time. And so accountability, to Mike's point as well, when you have those certain people in your life, they can charge you up when it's time to charge you up because you are not going the direction that God had revealed to them about you. And so those people are important to that tool belt as well as to the story, that we have to always be mindful that when we make those mistakes or when we make those proper decisions, that accountability is coming on both ends. And we have to be willing to accept when accountability is laid down.
Amen. 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 Man, we just about out of time. I want to thank you all for an engaging hour conversation about toxic masculinity, what it is, you know, what it ain't. I want to thank you all for the sermon recap assistance, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having us, brother.
Appreciate it.
I'm glad it's all
good. Good. Next Sunday, this Sunday coming up, we're gonna talk about the choices. We're gonna talk about your favorite person, Mike Paul.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna talk about.
Hold on, which one? The one before the donkey or the one afterwards? You gotta make sure you clarify.
I'm going somewhere with that. We're gonna talk about how we as men sometimes think we doing the right thing and it'll be wrong as hell, or sometimes we think we wrong as hell to be right. And so this Sunday's sermon is called "Across 110th Street," based off of the great Bobby Womack song. And you know where I'm coming from, DK. I am coming from Romans 7:14 through 21, where Paul rambles on for 6 verses about why I don't want to do it, but when I do want to do it, I don't. But then I don't. But hey, guess what I did? And I guess what I realized? I don't know what I'm talking about. And so that's what we're going to talk about this Sunday. Pieces of a Man. What happens when you across 110th Street? I'm Pastor Terrence L. Thomas. I want to thank these gentlemen again. Look them up on Facebook. Support their work. Mike got a podcast. DK do lives every hour. I'm taking away from his live moment. And so we here. And I love both these brothers, man. Peace out.
Peace out.